Well, good afternoon, everybody. I hope everyone is well and coping with lockdown 3. I'm sure Netflix and YouTube are getting a good thrashing. Certainly, I hope of aviation-related footage and videos and movies. I, for one, have been going in overdrive for the last couple of days to research a most incredible guy and a name that I think if anyone has any interest in aviation will have heard of. But before I come on to this legend of aviation, I just wanted to remind you all while we're here, these Inspirability talks have now been running, would you believe, for almost a year. We are well over 20 and it's, I think, a position I feel quite fortunate to be in because I'm the one who gets to interview these greats of aviation. And we've spoken to pioneers, we've spoken to record breakers, we've spoken to all sorts of pilots from all sorts of different backgrounds from around the world. You know, we will continue to do that. And the reason we're doing this, of course, is to raise money for this wonderful charity, Aerobility. Now, these webinars, podcasts, if you like, have really taken off, metaphorically speaking. We have thousands and thousands of views now on these talks, and it's just brilliant because it's getting this charity out there, it's getting us heard, it's getting our name out there, and most importantly, it's getting us understood because we deliver a service to the disabled community in aviation, but beyond aviation as well. Anyone who feels they could realize their dreams, perhaps improve their lives, improve their outlook, can use aviation as a tool to do so, and we're going to hear a lot about that with somebody who shares those values today. Now, you can use this opportunity to donate to Aerobility as well. So, Chad, hopefully on the bottom of the screen soon, there we go. You can you can donate a little or as much as you wish to Aerobility this afternoon as you listen to this talk to underwrite our survival. The reason we did this was to maintain the cash flow, to maintain the service that we deliver, this unique service to the disabled community. So I hope you've got your tea or your beer or your wine and your pack of hobnobs ready because today really is a treat. The gentleman we're going to talk to today is the one and only Kermit Weeks. Now, Kermit, otherwise known as the Wizard of Orlampa, we're going to hear about why he has that name in just a moment, but I'm going to take the opportunity to give you all a bit of a background on Kermit. Some of you may not realize where he's come from, what he's up to, but also where he's going. You know, he really is a guy that inspires so many people. And it's not just about the aviation. In fact, it's, in his words, it's using aviation as a tool for people to realize their potential. And I mean, there can't be a better parallel to what we do there. So we're going to hear a lot about that. But Kermit is an aviation enthusiast and pilot, an aircraft builder and mechanic. He owns the world's largest private collection of vintage and classic aircraft, over 140 aircraft. And it's his, he says that, you know, an aircraft in that collection, he has either flown, does fly, or will fly. And there's no aircraft in that collection that he hasn't planned to fly or hasn't flown already. So pretty impressive stuff. Kermit is a world-class aerobatic champion, and he's also an award-winning author. Now, I have actually one of his books right here. Kermit signed this book for my daughter at the Oshkosh Air Show back in 2016, and there we go. There's the proof. So if you've got kids out there, Kermit is an award-winning author. He's published 4 books, and they really are very entertaining. Kermit, as I said, he's a designer. He's designed and built 2 aircraft of his own, the Weeks Special and the Weeks Solution, and that took him very neatly into aerobatics. And we may know Kermit for his Warbird exploits and his classic collection, but actually at the beginning it all started in the late 70s with his aerobatic competition flying. And he was placed world top 3 5 times, won 20 medals in World Aerobatic Championship competitions over 15 years on the US National Aerobatic team, and has won the US Nationals twice. So when we meet Kermit, we'll start there. We'll start at the origin, how it happened, and then how it led into what he's up to today. But the collection grew and grew. The collection began in the 70s and 80s, and it originally resided in Miami, but then moved to Polk City in Florida, just off the I-4 west towards Tampa. I'm sure many of you know it well who've been to Fantasy of Flight, which is Kermit's home. And he probably spends more time there than he does at home, like we all do at the airfield at the weekends. But we're going to hear a lot about that historic collection and how he keeps those aircraft in the air. But I want to finish with my introduction to Kermit about, you know, the recognition he's had for what he's doing for aviation around the world. As I said, you know, his reputation and stature across aviation is fantastic. His peers have recognized him many times. He's had a lot of awards and recognition for the work he does. So without further ado, I'm very privileged and honored to introduce Kermit.
Hey, John, how's it going?
How are you?
I'm doing great.
It's good to see you, Kermit. So what's it like out there? It's like you're in your office in Florida, is that right?
Yeah, sitting in the office, Fantasy of Flight, a little gray skies today, so you guys would feel at home.
Yes, we would. I'm in my short sleeves, but it's the central heating that's keeping me, you know, in my short sleeves today, not just the weather outside. So how's lockdown been? I mean, how's Fantasy of Flight? Have you had the chance to do much flying in the last few months?
I can fly if I want. We live in Florida. This is the land of the free. You know, California is the land of the prison, but we got a great governor, and you know, we're doing pretty well as far as the COVID stuff goes. And you know, it's pretty much life as normal. I mean, people wear masks and stuff. Some do, some don't. You know, I fly if I want to, but I've really been using the time to focus on developing some things, doing some writing and some other projects. So currently I've only got one airplane in license right now, my little S-39 Sikorsky, and it's a great go-to airplane for me because I can get it in and out of the hangar easy. I can go take off and land in the water, land behind my house and taxi up, you know, and it's give a ride or two if I need to. So it's always at my disposal.
Yeah, that's good. No, it's there's a lot of us that have been doing that, haven't they? You know, either, you know, getting in the hangar and just doing stuff to the aircraft that we haven't had the time to do, or DIY. But look, Kermit, we haven't got a lot of time, and we've got a lot to pack in, and you know, very much looking forward to the story, the life story, and then bringing it up to date. So I wanted to ask you, Kermit, the question that's on most people's lips: how did it all begin, and what inspired you to get into aviation?
Well, it was interesting. There was nobody in my family that was directly connected with aviation. It's been part of my past. I think people that follow me on my Facebook page realize I've always had two parallel paths of interest. One of them is obvious, everybody knows about, and that's the path of a fascination with what I call outer flight, the airplanes, flying aerobatics and stuff. But at the same time, in my early years, I began to develop an interest of what I call inner flight. And when I was reading books early on about airplanes and history and aces and that kind of stuff, you know, I was reading books about paranormal, psychic phenomena, ESP, parapsychology, eventually metaphysics and spirituality. And these two parallel paths followed me through my life and had nothing to do with each other until after Fantasy of Flight opened several years. And it was at that point I realized that, you know, what I was here to do, and partly, you know, what my mission here is. And there's a bit of a woo-woo side to me I've alluded to, and I haven't really talked about it a lot, but beginning to come out of my metaphysical closet, so to speak. And flight has been very much a part of my past, and I'm talking way past. I have had the opportunity. I've never done any drugs in my life, so let me get that off the table. Never smoked pot, nothing. And there was a reason for that, because nobody would believe my stories when they begin to come out. And I've had a chance to explore other realities. I connect with other realities. I went to a place called the Monroe Institute, where they use a sound technology to get you to go within and explore your own consciousness. And I've had some very, very interesting metaphysical type things. And in the process of that, I've learned about my past. So I've actually come from in the human form, this is my 4th lifetime in aviation. I built gas balloons outside of Paris in the early 1800s. I flew for the Germans in the First World War. I flew P-51s for the Americans in the Second World War. This is number 4. But I've also seen past lives in other life forms, test flying starfighters and on other planets and way, way in the past. So this has just been part of my spiritual DNA since I began. Not only the outer, but the inner as well.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And I think, yeah, we're all on a journey, aren't we? You know, a journey of discovery. And my goodness, you know, aviation has brought me out of myself, you know, discovered my inner soul. And, you know, it's quite it lays your character and your soul quite bare, doesn't it? You know, in the aircraft, it's just you and the machine. And, you know, it's a great leveler as well. You know, but there's not that many people who started as early as you did. I mean, tell us a story about, you know, it seems like you've always had a spanner and a hammer in your hand at some point in your life. And it was only a matter of time before you put that to the design of an aircraft. Tell us a story there about your early designs.
Well, it was interesting. When I was a kid, I was always fascinated with dreaming and designing and building. And when we would learn something about school, like the Pueblo Indians, I would go build a mud fort. Or we'd learn about, you know, I mean, my first airplane I built, there's a picture somewhere of a little biplane. I was 8 years old, and the landing gear design was a bit beyond my technical ability at the time. So I improvised and I put it on top of my little radio flyer wagon, and I'd go down the street, because we had a little bit of a hill there, dreaming about flying, you know. And so, and I mean, but it was not just flight. That was one aspect. I remember designing a submarine when I was probably like 10 or something like that. That's my first airplane right there when I was 8. That's building my airplane when I was 18. But basically, you know, I had a little submarine design, and I knew that it had to be buoyant to a certain degree. And so I had it weighted down. And the way I could go up and down was to have it a little bit heavy. And I had some bicycle tires, you know, like inner tubes from a car on the outside. And I had a bicycle pump inside the submarine so I could go up and down. So I was thinking about like that stuff early on. But I basically started flying control line airplanes in my early teens. That evolved into a radio control when I was in 10th grade. Eventually started learning to fly when I was 16, and bought a set of plans for an airplane that I built most of before I graduated from high school, before I turned 18. I went on to test fly the airplane when I was 22, and you know, it was downhill from there.
Yeah. So you know, I remember in my flying, you know, I learned to fly. I got the bug, and then I had a choice. You know, I could get my twin rating CPL, go down that road, or go down the fun road. I chose the fun road like you did. Yeah. And aerobatics has to be the discipline that just, you know, polishes your airmanship, your handling, your knowledge of yourself and the machine. And obviously getting to the level you did, you really must have you know, put the time in, you know, and obviously, you know, could fall back on your engineering knowledge as well. I mean, how did the aerobatic flying begin?
Well, it was interesting. Like I said, this flight aspect has been part of my spiritual DNA. I started to learn how to fly when I was 16. Back then, they used to have a Cessna $5 coupon in Flying Magazine. You clipped it out, and you could do an introductory ride for $5. Okay, I did that, and my first official lesson, my instructor was showing me spins. Okay, it was like destined to be. I was in my on my high school gymnastic team, and I was used to flipping around in the gym, so I immediately gravitated. It felt natural flipping around in the sky, and you know, there was an aerobatic school on the airport, and eventually, you know, I started taking some basic aerobatic lessons, and basically, actually, I taught myself aerobatics. So I had done 2 loops, and 2 snap rolls and a steerman with somebody. And I knew how to do spins in a Cessna 150 and stuff. But basically, I ended up, I got checked out in a Citabria, which is aerobatics spelled backwards, okay? And a friend of mine, you know, had gotten checked out before I did. And I said, hey, do you want to learn how to do aerobatics? So I showed him how to do loops, and I'd kind of do rolls, you know, just barrel rolls and stuff, and snap rolls and spins. And I'd never done a hammerhead in my life before. I said, yeah, let's try hammerhead. And we pull up and kick the rudder and kind of wallowed around, you know. So we taught ourselves, and I'd lay upside down on the couch, because when you're upside down, the controls reverse, because the rudder and the ailerons are, you know, if you think about it right side up, think about it upside down. So I'd lay on the back of my couch and pretend I was doing inverted turns, and eventually started doing inverted turns in an airplane that had no inverted system. So as soon as you got to here, the engine quit, and it wouldn't start again until you got back around. So you really had to learn, you know, how not to dish out. So it was fascinating. This was the 1982 World Aerobatic Championships in Spitzenberg, and I won the gold medal in this flight that's being shown right here. That's my Weeks solution. So I eventually got into aerobatics, and you know, I had a bit of a formal education, never really agreed with me, but I've been a life learner, and I dropped out of 3 schools. The last one and the most prestigious was Purdue University. And I had started my freshman year over again in aeronautical engineering, and it just wasn't happening. And I said, forget this. There were some other things that happened, and it was part of my life plan. I realized that now I was not destined to do formal education. So I had no formal training in aeronautical engineering. I left Purdue. By this time I had a S2A Pitts that I was competing in advanced. I went home, I rented a shop space, went out and bought a heliarc welder, taught myself how to heliarc weld, and designed the Weeks Special. And in that airplane, I made the U.S. aerobatic team when I was 24 years old. It had the biggest engine propeller combination that anybody put in an aerobatic airplane that size. You know, Curtis Pitts was working on one as well, and he lived 20 miles from me, so he was a friend. And I went to my first World Aerobatic Championship in '78 in Czechoslovakia, a complete unknown, 61 competitors, 18 countries. I got 3 silvers and a bronze, and ended up 2nd overall in the world. And I'm like, well, this is pretty cool. So I was designing the Weeks solution on the airplane as we were going home. And instead of going to the next engine, which was a 260 horsepower airplane, that's the Weeks Special, I jumped and I went to the 300 horse, and I came up with the Weeks solution, which is the black airplane. And, you know, these went through different iterations. The Weeks Special had 2 separate wings that I had tried. The Weeks solution, I flew in 4 or 5 world championships, and including all the cross-country time around Europe to Canada to Oshkosh, practices, all the contests I went to, and all the practice time was only 650 hours total time. So I was just naturally a pilot, and I would always, it was very interesting. I always thought like I was the director of a film, and where people would, because in the cockpit, you use the references of the airplane to be perfectly vertical, because, you know, air show flying is like being at the circus. Competition flying is like a gymnastic meet. You're being graded on the precision. And while everybody at a world championship does do all the maneuvers and the sequences, there's a big difference between the quality of the guy that's first and the guy that's last. And so I always would not only use the ability in the airplane to see it, but I would think of what the judges were seeing. And there were times when I knew the judges, like if I'm about to go out of the box, the wind's blowing me out to get a penalty point, the judge couldn't tell if I was vertical or not. I would cock the airplane down. I'd stay in the box. Everybody else would go out. So I was thinking, what are the judges seeing? Not what am I seeing inside the airplane? And I think that was another ability that I had, to be able to perceive what the judges were looking at.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, because, you know, it's always said, isn't it, that, you know, if you're an air show pilot, the best schooling is to be, you know, having gone through the competition aerobatic route. because you understand so many of those basic rules, and of course it polishes your flying. And I think for competition aerobatics, again, a bit like being on your own in a single seater, everything's laid bare, isn't it? You can't hide. And what was it like to sort of weigh up the field around you? Because I know the Russians really kind of hit at a world level. The Russians really started going for it in the 80s with the Yak-50. They designed that aircraft to ultimately win the world championship. So who were the dominating nations when you started, and where did you leave it? And then before you went on to your next chapter.
Yeah, it was fascinating. It was interesting because the Russian pilots, that was basically their job. They were aerobatic instructors, and that was their job. When they flew on the team, that was part of their job. Everybody on the U.S. team, man, we were just weekend warriors. It was a hobby, modifying and building our own airplanes and blah, blah, blah. And it was really a fantastic expression of the different cultures. Okay, and I remember in Czechoslovakia, my first world championship, there was a group that came down from, they were like the equivalent of the Czechoslovakian NASA, and they came down and they singled me out because I was doing fairly well, and I ended up second behind a Czech, and basically, they interviewed me through an interpreter, and they said it was one of the coolest things to express myself of the freedom that we have in America. And they said, well, basically, we understand you designed and built the airplane. And I said, yeah. And they said, well, what was your, you got an aeronautical engineering degree, blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, actually, I dropped out of school. And it was pretty much eyeball engineering. And I knew what worked from other airplane designs. And I knew what was weaker and what was stronger. And if I got into, and I know it was only, there was no reason. I never asked a question on the design of the week special, but I did ask 2 engineering questions to somebody that I knew I was beyond my element to give me a tubing size by extending my engine mount or something. So the first thing was, where are you going to aeronautical engineer? No, I dropped out of school. The second was, well, we heard that you built this. Yeah, why I built it, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, yeah. And they said, well, so you're a certified welder. I said, well, no, actually, I taught myself how to weld, and I gas rigged it, and I read about it, and I knew you had penetration, and I cut it, and I'd look at it and make sure it was okay. And finally, I welded up a T, and I beat the crap out of it. And when the tube broke before the weld did, I declared myself a welder, and I finished my first airplane, And then the next one, they said, well, is there, how did you do the design? Did you do this in a wind tunnel? And I just looked at him, I pointed up, and I said, the sky is my wind tunnel. I felt so good. And these guys were looking at me like, I'm not just a kid. I'm 25 years old at that point. So,
yeah, just strap it on your back and just go, just try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, one of the things about competition aerobatic flying is you learn the limits of not only the airplane, but yourself. And this applies to life. This is a great metaphor for life because, obviously with the G-forces and stuff, you have to know you're tightening up your stomach. If you do a bunch of negative stuff and then all of a sudden it's followed by something that's, a hard positive maneuver, you've got the chance of blacking out. I blacked out one time and I woke up headed at the ground at about a 30-degree angle at 800 feet. And I've known other people that have blacked out. And, and so you got to know your own physical thing. And it used to take us, if you hadn't done aerobatics in a while, it took me in Unlimited about 3 days to get my G tolerance back. And, you see the guys on the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds. Yeah, they got G. Well, I don't think the Blue Angels do, but they've got G suits, but they're not doing any negative stuff. Anything we did positive, we did negative as well. And transition from negative to positive can mess you up in a hurry. And so, but the other thing is knowing the limits of what the airplane has and the controls you have to make it do what you want to do. One of the things that happens is there's an airplane called a Humpty Bump where you're going vertical and you pull around this way. Okay, basically you go up and then you pull around like an inside loop, okay? Well, the airplane wants to do that easily, but when you're going around the other way, the airplane and the torque are working opposite. And as you're running out of speed and you've run out of aileron and the wing starts dropping, you got to start using the throttle to come back to keep the wings level. So you've got to know what the limits and what controls you've got to do. And so I see that as a metaphor for life. What do you have as a way of talents and skills? What can you do to get more out of them? And what are your personal limitations that you can expand your potential on, you know? So to me, aerobatic flying was the epitome of the expression of the metaphor of flight in this 5-sense, 3-dimensional reality. So I think that was part of the reason why I was drawn to it. And, you know, like you said, you know, I flew 5 or 6 world championships, won 20 medals. And at some point, I mean, the big deal was there was a big fork in my path of life, and that was Hurricane Andrew. I had just come back from what became my last world championship in France, which was a no contest because the weather, they only had 1 flight, so they didn't declare world champion. And I came back, flew the air show at Oshkosh, landed. The next weekend, Hurricane Andrew came through, collapsed my whole museum, crushed my airplanes, and neither one of them has been rebuilt. And I knew at that point I was done with aerobatics. And literally 4 months later, after 4 years of working, they handed me my permit to build Fantasy of Flight. And life was saying, it's time to get out of Miami. Let's go to Central Florida and focus on Fantasy of Flight. Yeah, sometimes life whacks us upside the head really hard, and that's called a clue by 4.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting, and just to talk about the you know, the G tolerance and the human factors. You may have heard of the very famous wartime pilot in the UK, Douglas Bader, who had his legs amputated before the war, and then became you know, a famous pilot flying the Spitfire. We know the family of Douglas, and it's very interesting because NASA were keen to understand his tolerance on G, because of course he didn't have lower limbs where the blood could pool and affect, you know, his consciousness. So yeah, that whole topic is really quite fascinating, and of course everyone's different, everyone's made differently and reacts differently in the cockpit, and I'm sure that has advantages and disadvantages as well. But just as you've neatly taken us into the next chapter of your life, Kermit, you know, you left aerobatics behind, but clearly set you up perfectly in terms of you know, flying these wonderful machines that you now own and operate. So you had obviously begun collecting vintage and classic aircraft. Tell us about the early days. You know, obviously at some point there had to be a place for you to put them all, which was Miami. So tell us about the early days.
Well, it was interesting. While the flight thing was happening on this parallel path, the metaphysical one was also going on, and they were beginning to interact. I mean, in my early 20s, I started having conscious out-of-body experiences, and this happened for about 3 decades. But it was interesting. When I was digging out from the rubble of Hurricane Andrew, I was beginning to sense something was guiding me, okay? And I never got a blinding flash of light, but over the years, I've developed this sense, I won't go into all the details, but basically I developed this connection, and I was trained at some level to learn how to connect with other aspects of self, or, you know, whatever you want to call it. And what I've learned to do is, and I didn't realize at the time, but for the first half of my life, I was being nurtured along on my path, and I didn't realize it. It's almost like at this level of a reality, we're puppets. And at the puppet level, we don't have a clue what's coming down the pike, okay? But there's this other aspect of us that's the puppeteer from a metaphorical point of view. And, you know, one of the ways synchronicity works is the puppeteers talk behind the scenes. Maybe that's why we're having this conversation, and 3 months ago, we didn't know we were going to have it. Okay, so that's one of the ways synchronicity works. But also what happens, what I've learned over the time and what developed, and I was trained to do, is once you learn to connect through the strings, you become a unit and go through this life, whether it's through intuition, a sense of knowing. Everyone has to discover how they can utilize that for their own purpose. But at some level, it's just you, okay? You're not surrendering to anything other than just you from what I've been shown and whatever. There's different aspects of you or whatever. So basically, you get to go through this reality like Avatar as a unit, mission control. And what happens is really anything outside of that is potential ego land, okay? I dropped ego so long ago, and I just now, and one of the things that's happened that, I basically, we all channel at some level when ideas spontaneously come into our mind. It's the puppeteers dropping ideas and blah, 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 or whatever you want to call it. But I've developed it to the point to where I channel every day. I'm literally talking to my friends, okay? I use them for business decisions. I've gone over past history. It's phenomenal. And what became so obvious in my story, and I know there's people that can't relate to this, but there are people that do, but we can all relate to, going to pick up the phone and you kind of know who it is before you get it. It's little things like that. And we all have the ability, even though we live in a 5 sense reality, we all have the ability to tap into that 6th sense, if you will. And, I've just learned to live that way. And, the only thing I'll say, I was going to save it to the end, and I'll save it to the end, but I want to repeat it now, is the fact that the only thing I would recommend that anybody consider doing is, number one, be true to yourself. Okay? Listen to others and listen to peer pressure and blah, blah, blah. But number one, always be true to yourself. And number two, and this is key to what Fantasy of Flight's all about, is follow those energies that lead you beyond yourself. Because at some level, what I was shown and what I realize now is that aspect that's leading you beyond yourself is just you saying, come this way. Okay? Yeah. So learn to connect through the strings in whatever way that means to you, and play with it. You may make mistakes, you may stumble here and there, but you'll learn from those things and get it to work for you. Yeah,
that's fascinating stuff. And what pops into my mind, Kermit, is dreams, ambition, hope. Particularly in times like these, it does make us think about the finer things, the things we want but we can't have. And I do agree. I think again, using aviation as that pathway. A lot of us have probably realized dreams, but we can also make new ones, and I think for the guys and girls in Aerobility, that's really important. And I think with the lockdowns that have happened recently, the other part of society, the part of society that doesn't have to deal with disability or loneliness, has actually understood what it means, because disability can be a lonely, isolating experience. And so I do feel that your comments are really justified, particularly in these times. It's really quite interesting to hear you talk about that. In terms of the fantasy of flight, now everything as you've just described starts with an idea, a dream, an ambition. And did you ever believe you would have this business, this collection, this wonderful thing to share? Because one thing that's loud and clear for me, Kermit, is the fact that you do have this collection, but it almost feels like it's your your number one priority is to share it with other people, to allow people to have that experience that you want to offer at Fantasy of Flight to improve their lives. And again, just like Aerobility, you're using that as a tool for their, to support their dreams and ambitions. And I can vouch for the Fantasy of Flight experience. I visited there myself, and it is pretty profound. It's an awesome place to go. But tell us about that vision you had, and when did it start?
Well, it was interesting when if my friends had told me what I would be doing in the future back then, I would have thrown my hands up and said, "There's no way. There's no way." And so what they've done, and hopefully everyone's guidance or whatever you want, they'll only give you what you need, and they'll bring you slowly, slowly this way. And all of a sudden, I find myself down the road like, oh my God. I mean, I live so far outside the fringes of most people's reality that I have to pinch myself at times. So I didn't realize I was following the energies, because at that time early on, I was being nurtured along on my path. But eventually I began, and it wasn't a blinding flash of light, it was going slowly over a hump. And I began to realize it was happening. And eventually I began to learn to connect in ways that became very, very manifest, and became more of a way of life. And that's developed. And now I literally sit down every day and I'm talking to my friends, and I get all sorts of fascinating information. And so what happened was, the collection, like I said, the collection is just an aspect of Kermit Weeks. It's not my whole life. And what's going to happen here is part of what I'm creating, and I've been led to create, is to stand on Walt Disney's shoulders and what he left me, okay? And literally create an entirely new industry. If you go back, and bear with me, I would put on the table that, imagine the traveling gypsy bands going around entertaining, blah, 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 okay? Well, at some point, that evolves into a giant Barnum and Bailey, Ringling Brothers circus, okay? And now that's the greatest freaking thing that's happening. But the circus only came to town so many times, and then people started thinking, well, what can we do to where we can, have something all the time? And so out of the evolution of the circus came the amusement park industry. Coney Island, Palisades Park, okay? Now we got Ferris wheels, wooden roller coasters, Tunnel of Love, bumper cars, okay? And, all sorts of games and stuff. So that became the next industry. And by the way, the circus is now defunct after 146 years. There's cycles in every industry. And basically in 1955, Walt was at the amusement park convention in Chicago. He laid out his plans for Disneyland. They all said he's crazy. You're going to lose your tail. They're either irrelevant or they're out of business. Okay. Well, you're seeing the beginning of the demise of the existing industry that Walt started, and pendulum swing in society. You have to understand what Walt's segue was. Walt's segue was, in America, we had just come out of World War II and Korea, and we didn't have to deal with the aftermath of the cleanup. We came home to our town. The women were in the workforce, 2.3 kids. We got a great interstate system to take our campers around Americans and not look at devastation. And it was leave it to Beaver time. That was Walt's segue. And so Mickey Mouse, wow, and all this stuff, we were looking to escape from reality. Well, now reality is staring us in the face, and we're going to have to deal with it, okay? So what I'm going to do is stand on Walt's shoulders and create the next industry. But it's not about entertainment as an end product. It's using entertainment as a means.
Well, I think you may have lost Kermit there, and I'm just going to check to see if I am still connected, as I'm not sure which end we have the issue with. So Chad or Mike, if you want to just come on and let me know if it's my end that's dropped, or if it's Kermit's Wi-Fi that's dropped.
Hey John. Hi everybody. Yeah, John, I think we're still live, so I think it may be an issue stateside.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, we'll stay live, and then we'll let Kermit try and get back online, and I will monitor my phone just to make sure he's not trying to reconnect or advise me what's going on. So until he reappears, I know the guys are working in the background. Mike, you and I have been to fancy a flight, and we could probably spend the next the next half an hour talking about our experiences, but we don't need to do that because Kermit's back. Kermit, can you hear us?
1 second. I'm almost there.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, guess what happens when you don't plug your computer in and you lose your all my power got like 0 that went on the battery, and I apologize for that.
No, not at all, not at all. No, you were telling us about the next step for your, bringing people through.
So basically, imagine the existing industry uses entertainment as a means to entertain you, and they basically focus on external spectacularism, okay, which is great. It's fun. Oh my God, they've developed it to the nth degree using amazing technology and stuff. What I want to do is I want to create something instead of you're on a roller coaster with 49 other people and it's a 5-minute whoopie-doo experience, and like, oh, let's get back in line again. Where's the next one? Because you eat it like popcorn. What I want to do is I want to create things to use entertainment as a means to an end, to your own self-discovery and self-transformation. You walk into my theme park, one person, there's a sign outside that says, warning, once you step beyond these gates, you may not leave the same person, okay? You basically go in, we don't tell you anything. Everything we have is common to the human experience. There's no value system, doing something new, accepting limitations that others place upon you, things like that. We'll use aviation stories to deliver that were real, because everything I'm going to deliver is based on things that are real, where I would say the existing industry basically is not. Okay. Yeah. And so our mission statement is to light that spark within, which is you bringing what you truly are into this reality of light and expressing it in your own unique way. You change yourself inside. You leave a different person and nobody knows what went on. If I can deliver that, I'm onto something really, really big. And I think you're going to see the planet is going to be ready for something like that. You're going to be seeing a little bit of the waning of the existing industry. And I think when I finally come out with this, everybody's going to go, oh my God, this is so obvious. Why didn't somebody think of this? And the world's going to be ready for it. So instead of, going to the current theme park industry and being a hero in their intellectual property, I want you to come to Fantasy of Flight as a reverse deal, as a wellspring source of your own self-inspiration. And when you leave, there's going to be a sign that says, and for anybody who's been to Fantasy of Flight, you've always noticed why my welcome mats face out the door. It's always been that way since day one. You're going to see a sign that says, welcoming you to becoming the greatest hero you can be in the greatest story you can ever participate in.
Wow.
Whatever that means to you.
Yeah, no, that sounds really exciting, Kim. It really does. And that sounds like something that, we'll learn more about in the coming months and years as you bring that to reality for people to actually experience. So I'm very, very excited to hear about that. And I can tell you.
And John, just really quickly, for the airplane enthusiast, I'm going to create something that is going to blow away the airplane enthusiast. Nobody is going to do what I'm going to do. So they are going to be very, very happy. You're still going to see airplanes, still going to fly, blah, blah, rides and things like that. But it's going to be delivered in a way that the general public is going to come and they're going to go, oh my God, this is the greatest freaking product since sliced bread. Oh, and by the way, those airplanes are actually pretty cool. So I'm kind of creating a win-win situation where the non-aviation enthusiast is going to leave with a better and a broader appreciation for what aviation can mean metaphorically. Yeah. And potentially, like I said, instead of this many people liking old airplanes, maybe we get a smaller piece of the biggest freaking pie, which is 7.5 billion people.
Yeah. Wow. I'm ready. I'm ready to hear more. That sounds really, really fascinating. And Mike and I were just about to burst into conversation about our views on our experience at Fantasy of Flight. So I think I said to you a couple of days ago, Kermit, you know, I asked my wife to marry me 2 days before I visited Fantasy of Flight, and she's still here. And
I hope that wasn't the honeymoon.
No, it wasn't. Well, I would have loved to have made it my honeymoon, and I purchased this in the gift shop. And I highly recommend it to everybody listening. I-4, head west towards Tampa, and do not pass Fantasy of Flight, because if you do, you'll be very disappointed. But if I could focus a little bit, you talked about the enthusiasts and the airheads. So, you know, where do we start? I'm not going to ask your favorite airplane. I'm not going to ask you the one that you'll sell last if you had to. But can you, for those of us watching who haven't been to Fantasy of Flight, Kermit, from an aircraft perspective, you know, when you walk in, what do you see? I mean, if I'm not mistaken, your earliest aircraft is 1913. Your most recent aircraft is a 1956. You've got 140 plus aircraft in the collection, all of which have either flown, do fly, or will be flying. You must have a team of restorers and mechanics. You know, I mean, just put us in there. Put us in there, in the life of.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, I was my first employee, and I was my first mechanic, and you know, built and all that stuff. And at the Weeks Air Museum, for people that haven't looked at some of my, and please everybody check out KermitWeeks.com. I got a YouTube channel that's got tons of great cool videos checking out in World War I airplanes and P-51s and stuff. I've also got a Facebook deal. But basically what I realized was, and I use as a metaphor, all great stories come in 3 acts, okay? And the Weeks Air Museum in Miami opened in 1985. And that was at the beginning of Act 1, and it closed with Hurricane Andrew, August 24th, 1992. Fantasy of Flight opened in 1995, so like 3 years later. And that was basically Act 2. I closed Act 2 in 2014. So the facility that you would have come to with the restaurant and the Art Deco and all that stuff, that is currently closed to the public. I lost my butt for 18 and a half years. And we tried for a year by cutting costs down, cutting the staff down, cutting our hours down. And about 9 months into that year, the writing was on the wall. And I said, look, I need to shut this down. I would rather take the money I'm losing, which was a lot, and put it towards the development of what I now understand I'm supposed to be creating. So I shut the doors in 2014, but then a year later, I realized, you know, hey guys, I still have a lot of trademarks. I've got a sign out on the interstate that I don't really want to lose. That's the office I'm sitting in right now, a little bit beyond the top. But, and there's a story behind it. But basically, I needed to have a gift shop open to maintain my trademark status because I've got all these trademarks that I've got for the future concept. So we had a little hangar across the way. So right now I've got a little boring museum light, signs, ropes, a few kiosks. I am ashamed of what I've got open. You got to realize the facility that was the original Fantasy of Flight was only originally ever designed to be my shop. This is Fantasy of Flight, the original facility where my office and the 2 hangars and the restaurant were, and 2 other buildings, and eventually a third one, fourth one, is going to be literally my dream restoration and maintenance facility. Okay, so we've shut down that. We're turning, like, this hangar is going to be my restoration hangar. And, you know, we're turning this eventually into the dream shop restoration thing. And where people used to come in the arched gate entrance, which was always the entrance, there's a big open field. Why was the entrance always there? Because that open field is what I've always intended, where I've intended Fantasy of Flight to be. And so that, what I'm telling everybody is Act 2 closed in 2014. Oh yeah, we got this little museum light thing, whatever. You know, yeah, you can see a few airplanes, and it's really to keep the aviation enthusiasts happy a little bit. But in reality, it wouldn't be open, except I got to have my gift shop open to maintain my trademarks. And we've been working on the design and development of Act 3. And I'm telling everybody, go take a bathroom break, get a hot dog and a Coke. Act 3 is going to be in at some point. And I know I get some people out there on my Facebook page say, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. Well, they've obviously given up on it, but I can assure you I have not. I've been working on this for a very long time. I've got a lot invested in this. It's not just the airplanes. There's a long-term goal and dream of which the airplanes and stuff are a part of. And yeah, I own 140 airplanes. But there's also a not-for-profit that owns about 24 airplanes, most of which I've donated. So there's over 165 airplanes in the collection. And at some point, I see once I can create a product, a viable product that can generate income, that part of that income goes towards the collection. All of the collection is going to end up in the not-for-profit.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And, you know, Kermit, I know you're well known for your philanthropic work and making sure that aviation touches those that otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity. And I really look forward to seeing that. And one thing in terms of the real estate, one thing I got to get out of the open right now. Why Orlampa?
It was fascinating, and I tell you what, put the license plate back up there for a second.
Yep.
Okay. I've trademarked stuff over the years, and I realized I needed a trademark for Fantasy of Flight, and I trademarked my tagline, an attraction on a higher plane, way years before I understood what it meant. It's a play on words.
Yeah.
Not only is it a tourist attraction on a higher airplane, in other words, a higher standard within the industry, but it's literally you saying, come this way. It's your higher self leading you beyond yourself. And you put that down now, but basically where the Orlampa thing came into, when I left Miami looking for property, before I ever opened the Weeks Air Museum in 1985, I was looking for property in Central Florida because I realized, oh my God, I outgrew the collection before I ever opened the doors. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to go through 5 years of permitting with an airport authority, and I don't even own the building. I need to go to Central Florida where the tourist industry is. So I started looking for land, and I had 3 requirements, which I didn't realize at the time, but my friends had dumped into my head. The first one was I needed great tourist access, which I've got, okay? The second one was a 5,000-foot runway to get my heavier and faster airplanes in. And the third thing was water access to fly vintage seaplanes in their natural environment. I know of no museum on the planet where they have a vintage airplane museum and they fly seaplanes.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so this view right there is actually looking from potentially what's going to be the top of a control tower. And I'm explaining that area down behind me there, and the seaplane base will be behind me there with a lake.
Yeah.
That's the end of my short runway. But that whole open area there is basically where Act 3 is going to be. And that's what we're working on the design now. So I forgot where I was. Okay. So Orlampa. So yeah. I didn't realize it, but I realized at some point I was exactly 40 minutes to the doorstep of the Tampa and the Orlando airport. Okay. And it was interesting. I purchased a piece of property for something told me to collect some property. I've been collecting property myself for 30 years now. Okay. And people don't really realize how much property I've got, but I've got more than what Universal started with when they originally started in Orlando. Okay. And it's going to blow some people away at some point. With the potential, it's potential, but we've master planned kind of the bigger picture. And so the Orlampa deal, when we bought this piece of property, I thought, well, yeah, we could put it was kind of over on the corner where you got off, and I'm going, yeah, we could put a McDonald's in and make a bunch of money in short term, this and that. And by this time, I'm talking to my friends, and they said, yeah, well, you could do that, but there might be some reason why you want to, save it for later or something. They never tell me what to do. they always lay out options, and I follow those energies, and I've never been wrong. And it was interesting. The realtor, we were talking about this. He said, what we ought to do is we ought to come up with a name that defines the location. And my focus went like that. And I want to explain a little bit of a metaphor here for people to begin to learn to trust this connecting through the strings deal. John, if you and I walk into a party and there's 100 people there and 50 conversations, when we walk into that party, it's just white noise. Okay? It's just white noise. Well, guess what? Life is white noise. We listen to everything. So what are we supposed to listen to? Okay. And this is the effect that you're looking for, that I know everyone out there has had this experience, but begin to focus and work on this, because it's just you saying, come this way. You and I are standing there and we're thinking, who do I know here? Where's the bar? Where's the bathroom? Whatever. And all of a sudden, somebody on the far side of the room mentions John. Your focus goes, whoosh. Doesn't even faze me. It's not in my world. You're in phase with that. You're in resonance with that. And when things happen spontaneously and you go, it's life saying, pay attention to this, okay? So each of you out there, begin to play with this and learn how to work with it, because it's just you working with you. So with the Orlampa deal, I thought about that, and my focus was like, why am I supposed to pay attention to that? Eventually, it evolved into Orlampa, okay, which is exactly halfway between Tampa and Orlando. It just happens to be 7 letters, and I did not discover, I trademarked it for theme park services, land development, blah, 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 clothing and stuff. A long time ago, coined the phrase. I didn't realize till later, and I'm not going to get into it now, there is so much meaning in that word that it blew me away later, and it ties in with the same thing like an attraction on a higher plane. When I trademarked it, it was given to me, but I didn't understand what it meant until 5 or 6 years later. And it was the same thing with Orlampa. This whole Fantasy Flight project, including the mission statement and everything, was eventually, it was just given to me, I say from my friends or whatever, but it's coming from somewhere, and it keeps working for me.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think that in terms of location and accessibility, it doesn't get much better, in terms of getting in by air or by road. And I think you've absolutely got to follow your, where the direction you need to go. And in terms of the aircraft that are there, I know you and I had a brief chat before we went live, and I think we'll be here till Friday afternoon if we speak about every single one of your airplanes. But we've got we've got an audience here who are, I would say, pretty clued up on aviation. They know what a spark plug is and what a carburetor is. So let's give it a go.
Yeah.
Now I've got a bone to pick with you, Kermit. I know you love British airplanes, but I think was it '94 you bought the Sunderland, but that's okay because you kept it flying. I'm sure if it stayed in the UK, it probably would have not ended up flying and stayed in a museum somewhere. So tell us the story about that aircraft and what attracted you to it. How did you get it over to the US, and what's it doing now?
Well, I feel for the people that felt that it should have stayed there, but you got to realize, I was at a disadvantage. I buy an airplane that's in a different country. I've got to get it flying. I got to risk getting it across, blah, 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 blah. And I feel, but at some point I hope to, we're going to do a Pan Am recreation of a 1930 Pan Am Clipper base down on the water. This will be kind of the main star. All the seaplanes are going to be down there with an Art Deco restaurant and all that kind of stuff. So I think in the long run, it'll be a great place for people to come. And yeah, we flew it across. I flew it 2 air shows at Oshkosh, and eventually brought it down here. I had to leave it in the lake for a year because I was still working on the permitting to get my seaplane ramp out, and we finally did. And actually, one of the hangars I actually designed to fit the airplane in, because the top of the propellers determined the height of my hangar doors. And the vertical fin, I had to get in the hangar, which was above the hangar doors. I've got a little roll-up door that goes in there specifically to get the tail of the Sunderland in. So, while I was following energies, and I was drawn to it, at some point, yeah, it's a cool airplane. But if you think about it, it's really an albatross around your neck at some point. So yeah. Edward Holton had it. I mean, he never was a flyer or pilot, that, to my knowledge, but he enjoyed having it. He spent a lot of his inheritance, keeping it going or whatever. But at some point, it's like, you got to put it in and out of the water is a big issue. If it's in the salt, like, they had it down on the Solent, Southampton, that becomes an issue. And when it's in the water, let me tell you, that is like having a baby in a forest of wild animals. You got people trying to break in. Are the float switches still working? Are the batteries still charged? Is it leaking? You got storms. We got hurricanes here. I mean, if you're not going to use it a lot, then you're better off storing it. I'm the first person. I've stored this airplane inside more than anybody in its life. Okay. Right. And so, Edward had it, I think, on the Thames or somewhere, Chatham or somewhere he had it in a hangar for a while. But they got damaged in a windstorm and they had to fix the wing and stuff, So it's a big, expensive endeavor. And I built the largest free span structure in the county that I live in to fit this airplane in. I mean, the hangar also fit a B-29, but the B-29 was the wingspan consideration, and the height and the tail thing was for the Sunderland. So are we flying it now? No. I've kind of been there, done that. But what's going to happen is in the future, fantasy of flight is all about potential. And all my airplanes, they may not all fly right now, but they all have potential to be rebuilt, to fly at some point, but not just to fly them because Kermit wants to go fly it and everybody gets to read in an airplane magazine. Kermit spent millions of dollars to see a picture in an airplane magazine of it flying. No, I've been there, done that. I'm trying to create a sustainable business that will perpetuate this, maybe not for you to see it fly again, but maybe for your grandkid to see it fly again. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I expect it'll fly again in my lifetime, maybe not, but but the potential is going to be there. And I'm trying to lay that foundation now. So, I think we all tend to live in a society that we want everything right now. We just keep popping popcorn in our deal. And, saying things that really have value and meaning take time to bring into this reality. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, of course. And it's just wonderful to see this footage here of it being cared for so lovingly, and the fact that it's indoors means its life is guaranteed. Well, one of the things that I really enjoy watching, Kermit, is the Kermit cams, which is you keeping us up to date and engaged and informed on the latest projects and the progress you have with projects. And there was one thing that really struck me, and there's two reasons for it. One is your this very small world of aviation collectors and restorers around the world. That you're obviously looking for your next projects, and you're keen to share information with your friends, but also your decision process. What's your next project and why? And I saw the Yak 9. That really struck me. One, because it's from the UK, and two, because I've got a soft spot for Russian airplanes. So I'm taking dealer's choice here, and I'm gonna just focus on the Russian stuff you've got. Okay. Where are you at with the Yak 9? And for the viewers that don't understand, what's the story there?
The Yak 9 I saw a long time ago, and I got to mention, I've got connections to a lot of Brit guys. Tony Bianchi was an aerobatic pilot on the UK team, and I would have met him early on. Of course, his dad, Doug Bianchi, was on. Tony had, and Tony's business, personal plane services, was instrumental in helping me get the Sunderland up and running and back, the Mosquito, rebuilt the Spitfire, a couple other things. And I saw that Yak 9 project a number of years prior, and it looked like a pretty cool display airplane. They'd gotten it out, of the East Bloc somewhere, and but at the time it didn't feel right, and I think they had done some work on it, maybe over in Hungary or something like that, and the deal kind of went south, and it went. Anyway, the person finally basically threw their hands up, and Tony called me one day and he said, and they shot me a price that I couldn't pass up. So it's over here. It's a project. I'm talking Russian. Well, I've got the I-16, a little Polycarpov. I've got 3 Tu-2s that are really, really good projects. What else have I got? The PO-2, the little Podoa Night Witch airplane. I might be missing something, but you'll have to.
Yeah, the Night Witch's story is it's incredible, isn't it? The things you don't read about or see on the Discovery Channel.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned Douglas Bader prior there. So this is the Polycarpov. I purchased it out of the Midland Museum where the CAF was out there in Texas, and we got it back here about a year ago and put it on display. But what were we just talking about?
The Night Witches and
the Night Witches.
Yeah.
So it's funny that you meant the Night Witches and Douglas Bader. I've actually got 2 experiences that are being designed into Act 3. And in the case of the Douglas Bader one, ties in totally with Aerobility. And it's basically how many times in life do we accept the limitations that others place upon us? And Douglas Bader's story was picked specifically to express that. So in Act 3, you're going to come up to a thing that basically, it's not going to say this is the Spitfire experience, okay? You might see a Spitfire sitting outside the entrance, okay, in the hangar, but it's going to say how many times in life do we accept the limitations that others place upon us? You're going to go in there, you're going to hear a little bit of a pre-show of the Spitfire Bader story, blah, 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 losing his legs. At some point, you're going to go sit in a Spitfire cockpit. We're going to build them. They're going to be like you're in the real airplane. It's not going to be the whole airplane, but you're going to be sitting in a Spitfire cockpit, okay? It's going to be black out here, dimly lit here, smells and everything. You're going to sit there and you're going to listen to Doug's story. You're going to put yourself in his shoes. And so the future way that we deliver things is 3 parts. And the first thing is a theme common to the human experience, accepting limitations others place upon us. You deliver it through the most profound way to plant seeds of change that's ever been creative, entertainment, because we're open and receptive. And then you deliver it in the most profound way to learn and grow that's ever been created, not through teaching, not through preaching, not through clubbing your neighbor over the head saying this is the way it's going to be. It's through your own self-discovery. It's by lighting that spark within. And when you self-discover it for yourself, you own that experience. It's your experience. It's got sticky value. It's memorable. And you're the only one that knows it when you leave fantasy aflight. And so the Douglas Bader story is that particular one. The Night Witch one, which will be the same thing, you're going to get in a PO-2 cockpit, similar thing. And what's going to happen is that's basically what potential is lying around you that you're not seeing, that you're not utilizing. Look what those Russian women did. The Russians were so desperate. They were getting their butts whipped. They were throwing anything and everything they could. And, we had Rosie the Riveters over here banging rivets, but these freaking women, they had a whole squadron of officers, mechanics, pilots, and they would hand chuck bombs on the enemy at night, hoping not as a tactical means to try and blow them up, but from a strategic point of view, so they wouldn't sleep, not knowing. So the next day, their fathers, their brothers, and their sons would have a better chance of surviving. And so, so part of that can be where, people, look around. What potential are we not using? And the Russians saw the potential in the women, and they did. And sometimes in the times of crisis, we pull out things that we don't normally utilize. So what are we not only seeing without us, but what aren't we seeing within us as well?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And from what I can hear and understand, I think you're going to take us on a journey of discovery of ourselves, in Act 3, as you put it, and really quite interesting. And yeah, I like the idea of using the tool of aviation to do it. I want to turn to a couple of other aircraft here, and the GBZ. So that, if ever you've got to wake up after a full night's sleep, that's the day, right, when you're going to get into that aircraft. I've seen the footage. What a machine. Just the biggest possible engine, the smallest fuselage, go as fast as you can, the golden era of air racing. Tell us a story about the GBZ, Kermit.
It was built locally down here by Kevin Kimmel, who's actually doing my Lockheed Vega project right now currently. And Delmar Benjamin, who flew the air show in the R2, which I also now own. Delmar test flew it. I can't remember. He either put 12 hours on it or he flew it 12 flights or something, And then it was on loan here for a while. And after a while, Kevin and I cut a deal. And it was interesting because I was following the energies, not realizing, as you see on the cover of the book that you just showed, it's my main character in my little airplane character books, Yeah. So that's GBZ. And so I flew the airplane twice. And it was at the time that once I bought it, I started to do some research on it because I was coming up with a video for it, of talking about the airplane and stuff. And I saw that crash of Lowell Bales in the airplane where they had either put a bigger engine in it, they were trying to go faster, and it was really bumpy or whatever. And the wing comes off, and unfortunately, he gets killed. And I'm like, oh my God! I said that's flutter. That's aileron flutter, and that's why the wing left, because the wing just leaves and the airplane goes in. And I lost a friend. Actually 2 friends in aerobatics from flutter. I've had flutter both on the special and the solution. And when my friend got killed in an airplane that we had built in my shop, it was a monoplane, like a Stevens Acro type airplane. And this airplane is, if you fly pit special, this airplane's not an issue. It's not an issue. What you got to realize, it was a dangerous airplane back then because they were flying really easy airplanes. Okay. Yeah. But this airplane was a hot little airplane. And for the normal pilots of the day, they were flying off of grass runways, and and it was they were pushing their boundaries from a pilot skill perception. But my friend got killed. I was out of town at the time. I heard the accident report. There was a guy that was out Everglades where he was practicing, watching him for a little bit. He was out shooting his gun, and he had earphones on, and he watched him a little bit. He went back to shooting his gun out, as far west as you could go on the roads. And all of a sudden he hears this, and he looks up, and the airplane's coming down. All this stuff's fluttering down. The airplane goes straight in, and I'm going, that was aileron flutter. Well, nobody was going to do anything about it. So I asked Curtis Pitts, and Curtis introduced me to a guy up in Atlanta, who was one of the 3 guys that developed the flutter science for the Americans and did all the flutter tests on all the World War II airplanes. He came down, and he, other than expenses, he didn't charge me anything because he saw what we were doing. And we found out there was a flutter problem on the airplane. It was the same. Leo Laudenschlager had the problem. He had flown for 7 years, and he was lucky. Okay. And so then I quit flying this airplane, and I learned later that Delmar had been lucky. He flew 8 years in air shows. This airplane and the R2 both have a problem above 240 miles an hour. And the conditions have to be just right. And once it goes, it's gone. And in a monoplane like this, you don't have the redundancy of a biplane. I had aileron flutter in the weak solution, and I lived to tell about it. I had horizontal tail flutter in the weak special, and I was the first one to put the braces on the leading edge. They'd lost a couple of tails off of the Pitts S2As. And Delmar told me something, landing here. He said he learned the hard way. He said, never go below 100 miles an hour unless the wheels are on the ground. So it's not a 3-pointable airplane. And, he just said, you just respect the airplane. he's still got a big scrape on the underside of one of the wingtips of the R2 as a reminder, to keep the speed up.
Yeah, right. Well, let's turn to. I don't mean to give the GBZ a bad press, but let's turn to some dependable aircraft, some thoroughbreds, which, of course, is the P-51. It's just an iconic machine, and if ever there's an aircraft that really helped us win the war, it's got to be that aircraft. And of course, you have the P-51C and the D. And are you rebuilding the A model? Or
yeah. The A model is out in Salinas, California, and
right.
It's coming along. And it's going to be interesting too. I want to do something a little bit different. Everybody tries to come up with a different paint job or something. Mine's going to be, I believe, the first one with 4 20mm cannons.
Oh, nice, very nice. Yeah. Well, of course, the C model, I believe, was the mount of the Tuskegee Airmen, and we actually in this country in the UK have a D model owned by Peter Teichmann, who has his aircraft painted up in the Tuskegee colours. And I was really entertained, Kermit, to watch the video of a reunion that you hosted at Fantasy of Flight some years ago for the Tuskegee Airmen, and you described how you took 5 of the guys flying and how they recited their stories. And what are your memories of that day, and how it really kind of connected you to the history of the machine?
Well, we used to have Tuskegee reunions for Black History Month, but I think my memory is better than yours, because the one you saw was a P-40 reunion of the AVG Flying Tigers, and I flew them in the P-40. So I don't have the capability in the C model to take somebody because it's got the original fuel tank in the back there. But the Tuskegee guys, and I chose Lee Archer because there was a great story behind it. And he was still alive. There's a video of me on my YouTube channel. He was out there when I test flew the airplane. We became good friends. He was a great guy. Came to Fantasy of Flight a number of times. Of course, most of these guys are all since gone now. And I painted mine, and to my knowledge, I was the first person to actually fly an airplane that had the Tuskegee colors on it. At the time, the CAF was doing their airplane, and they did it to generically honor. Theirs is called Tuskegee Airmen, which is great. I think we've kind of covered all the bases. So I took the top scoring pilot with 4 kills, and they did the whole group. And I've had a chance to meet some great people. I just recently did a quick little thing with, oh my God, George. He was just here the other day doing something, and it was on my Facebook page. And they have a great story, and at some point, I intend to utilize their story in a way to deliver something common to the human experience at Fantasy of Flight. Because at some level, we're all, whether it's a bully or, at some level, we're all, guilty of, demeaning other people or whatever. Theirs was at a very, very high level. And, I think we've come a long way to change those things. And, anyway, that's me flying the C model, taking off, gear coming up.
Yeah.
And this C model one here, I think I've got probably pushing 15 million views on my 3-part series of this. So it's been very, very popular.
Yeah, no, I probably count for 1 million of those. and it's, it is a beautiful machine, isn't it? And when you strapped yourself in to the P-51 Kermit for that first solo, if you can remember, I'm sure you do. What did it feel like? I mean, it's such a privilege.
Well, I had plenty of time in the D model, so they fly very similar. The thing in the C model is, you're closed in a little bit more, and you can't move your head around as much, but they fly basically the same. I had an emergency on the first takeoff. And, and I had to land. I literally just went around the pattern. That's funny. My first flight in the P-51D, I had 4 emergencies as well. Every first flight I do in a Mustang is only 2 minutes. There's something going wrong here. hopefully the third time will be the charm with the A model. But you know, you got to do whatever you can do. If you watch the video of the test flight, I talk through it, you know, of course, post in the studio. But, you know, I'm looking for speed. You know, what happens if the engine quits here? What happens if this happens? What do I do? Blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, I took off and the friggin' temp was going up to the red line. So I popped the emergency deal. You can actually drop the doghouse, the little scoop down there, an additional 4 inches, and I immediately landed. And we went back and, you know, made some adjustments, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but something needed to be adjusted. Went up, did another flight, and then everything was fine, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Now, well, one question that's been on my lips as I've sort of followed your journey in collecting aircraft, Kermit, is I would say the majority of us fly a handful of aircraft at most. For you, you're flying a lot of different types of aircraft, you know, twins, singles, tail wheels, radials, rotaries, you name it. How do you, what's the word? How do you avoid complacency? How do you try to maintain some kind of standard in things like checklists, in things like emergencies? You know, I mean, do you have of the Kermit way of doing things just to keep yourself safe? Obviously, you read the book the night before, but you know, how do you kind of cope with the varying types from a handling perspective as well? You know, muscle memory. You know, you get into something like a Mustang, and then the next day you fly, you know, a twin-engine nose-wheel bomber.
When I used to do members days at the Weeks Air Museum, I used to fly 8 different airplanes. I'd go from a Grumman Duck to a Curtiss Jenny to a P-51 to a Mosquito to a standard J1 to a, you know, whatever. I mean, a T6, I'd fly like 8 different airplanes. And it was interesting when we had our 15-year anniversary. It was the most airplanes I ever had flying at one time. Over the 3-day weekend, I flew 5 different airplanes on each day. So I flew 15 different airplanes. But what happens is an example, the first thing, you have to respect what you're going to do. Throw ego out the door, okay? Respect what you're going to do. And so I was flying competition aerobatics. I'd flew my first World Aerobatic Championship, and I'm flying blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking one day, I want to own a P-51. And I thought, well, you know, if I'm going to fly a P-51, I want to learn the way the guys did in World War II. I had not flown a retractable landing gear airplane. I went out and I bought an AT-6 from Mark Clark Courtesy Airplanes up in Rockford, Illinois. And because I wanted to learn the way they did, I knew what my limitations were, and it wasn't about my ego. I wanted to be safe, and I respected the airplane. I knew what I could do all in the week special, but I didn't know what a T6 could do. And I wanted to have that foundation to fly the Mustang. And so I went up there. Mark gave me, jumped in the back seat. I went and I did 3 takeoffs and landings with him. He declared me checked out in the airplane. And I brought a friend with me that I brought in the back, and it was like a February. We had to chip the ice off the hangar door to get the hangar door open when we left. And there was little snow flurries leaving Rockford, Illinois, heading south in the cold weather. And I brought my friend along specifically with a stick that if I forgot to put the landing gear down, to poke me in the head. Okay. And, you know, within 6 months, I had flown an aerobatic contest. I'd given my friends rides. I flew around the country. And, you know, and another friend of mine, aerobatic friend on the airfield, had bought a Mustang, but it was about 4 months away before he was going to get it. And all of a sudden, Mark Clark calls me up one day, says, "Hey, Kermit, I got this Mustang for sale, blah, blah, blah." And 6 months after I bought the T6, I was the proud owner of a P-51. And I rode in the back, and I knew what it felt like when the landing gear locked. You know, the speeds were completely different than the T6. And I rode in the back. It was in Pennsylvania. It was scheduled for an air show in Canada. We flew down, and he got out at the Sebring Airport after about, you know, 3 legs of me riding in the back. And I'd read the manual, and now I knew all the smells and the whistles and all that. I jumped in on my first flight. I had 4 friggin' emergencies. I took off, and unbeknownst to me, the radiator wasn't as nice as it should have been. And later we had to, back then they used to rod the radiators, so you had to clean the gunk out of them. Now we just put a new radiator in, or we put a new core in. But back then things were not, we overhaul engines different these days too, and they cost more. But basically I took off and I lost, it's going up in the red line. And I'm like, oh my God. So I power back, I immediately go to cruise, I slow down, I dropped the door, which I, dropped on the C model as well. That was my first emergency, blah, blah, blah. Then I put a little bit of flaps down, and we had 2 drop tanks, 55-gallon drop tanks, and we picked up free air show fuel at the air show in Canada, but only one of them worked. So now I'm sitting there, I got 1 drop tank that's empty, and I got 1 that's full, and I'm thinking to myself, do I drop the tanks? Okay, because I'm gonna have to belly this in, because now I've got a gear warning light that's telling me my gear's not down. I got a red light showing me the gear's not down. And then I couldn't get the rest of the flaps down for some reason. So I've got minimum flap, I got a red warning light, I've got the gear open there, and my engine's overheating. As I'm turning in on my first flight, 90 seconds into after my takeoff, I'm thinking to myself, keep the speed up, because everybody told me if you add the throttle and you're slow, it'll flip over and you'll crash. So I come in, I land. It turned out the micro switch needed to be adjusted on the gear deal. The guy said, well, yeah, the radiator, if you take off. And the problem was it was 110 degrees on the ramp. We had just landed. The airplane was already hot. It was hotter when I got out there. And I didn't know that if I waited a little bit and got out there quickly and took off and let it cruise, the temp would drop. Well, it did. And, so I flew around for about 15 minutes, jumped in the back, threw him out in Fort Lauderdale. I went down to Tamiami, threw my bags out, showed everybody the airplane, and I started giving rides.
you just got to drink from the fire hose when it presents itself. That's really, really interesting story. And I'm conscious at the time, Kermit. We could go through each one of your airplanes bit by bit, but I'm not going to put you through that pain. But one thing that I find fascinating is a lot of us read books, go to air shows. We see from the outside in the world of historic and classic aviation. But I guess the unique perspective you have is because you've flown these aircraft, and many of them, you've probably got that connection. You've probably got a really quite real awareness and understanding of what it must have been like to operate these weapons of war. Essentially, at least the majority of the aircraft in your collection were designed for a purpose.
And to elaborate on what you just said, you see it from the outside in, and yes, I've had the opportunity to see it from the inside out, but I try and share that experience with my YouTube videos and my Kermit cams stuff. Absolutely, and that's loud and clear. I mean, it's very rare that you see collections of this type made available to see in all the detail. I think the UK aviation fraternity and the aviation scene is up there. I think the UK and the US, and one or two other countries, Australia is a big one. There's a huge amount of interest in classic and vintage aviation, and for you to be able to share that with us, particularly in times like these, is really great. And I know it won't be long before we can actually get on a real aeroplane and fly to another country. I just wanted to say, from my perspective, I think this has been absolutely fascinating. It's been great to get an insight into where Fantasy of Flight came from and why, but also where it's going. And I think that's the really important thing, is for people to understand that this is really going to be an impressive opportunity to see where you're taking it in Act 3. And Kermit, I know that it's a Saturday afternoon out there for you now, so we won't keep you for too much longer. But I did want to just say to all the viewers out there that the experience I had in Florida was absolutely awesome. I remember reading the bedtime stories with the book I had. So go on to Kermit's YouTube channel, buy the book and just stay connected, because if you get the chance to go to Florida, you won't be disappointed. That's for sure, based on my experience. So Kermit, is there anything you wanted to share with us, share with the viewers? I know we were going to talk a bit about Aerobility, Yeah, I think what you guys are doing is very similar, kind of a mission with Fantasy of Flight. But I want to point out that you know, you say that you're working with people with disabilities. You have to understand every person on this planet is limited. We all are disabled. We find ourselves in this very limited human life form in three-dimensional reality. There's so much more beyond this planet and beyond this dimension. And what I've discovered is in these inner explorations is what everything truly is infinite potential. But within infinite potential, there's no experience, only the potential thereof. And so what happens was when infinite potential manifests in this reality of light, which is the paint with which we paint this experience, and the paintbrush with which we paint this with is consciousness or awareness. And so basically what happens is at some point we ask ourselves as infinite potential, what am I? And the only way infinite potential can answer that question is to create an experience, you, me, anything and everything that's manifest, okay? And at some point, it's seeing itself from its own limited perspective. And at some point on its journey, it has the ability to imagine beyond what it perceives itself to be. And it's that journey of transcendence of what all of reality is about. So when you say you're working with disabled people, yes, there might be people that can't jump in an airplane or they're in a wheelchair or something. That's not who they are. That's just how that spirit form of them happens to be experiencing an experience right now. And so to me, everybody's the same. Everybody's limited. And I would hope that once we all realize that each and every one of us is limited, and we're on our journey trying to go beyond ourselves, then hopefully we can be able to appreciate that everyone else is on their journey. And instead of trying to climb over and get on top of everybody, all of a sudden we embrace everybody like what you're trying to do, and we support each other on this journey of self-discovery and self-transcendence.
Well, that's just a wonderful way to end, Kermit, and I couldn't agree with you more. And isn't it just strange that if you look at the word disability and you remove the first three letters, you know, that's what we can all achieve. And of course we have our limitations, and I think certainly organizations like Aerobility and Fantasy of Flight, you know, aim to allow us to overcome those limitations, and I look forward to a long happy friendship with you, Kermit, and your organization. I know that we stand firm in our beliefs, and I think it'll be not too long before we get to meet. And of course all of you viewers out there as well, when you can travel, head to Florida, you know where Kermit is. But Kermit, I just wanted to say a huge thank you for giving your time, sharing your thoughts, being so honest and open, and giving us a bit of an insight into a passion we all share, which is of course aviation and flying. So on that, Kermit, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you very much.
I appreciate it, and look forward to getting over to the UK. It's been a long time since I had a really good scone.
Well, and is it jam first or cream first? That's the question. But we'll see you at Blackbush, that's for sure.
Good deal.
Cheers. Okay, well there you go. What a great guy. What a fascinating insight there into what's going on in Polk City in Florida. So it won't be long before we can get out there and see for ourselves the plans and the ambitions that Kermit has. I've been watching these YouTube videos for quite a few days just to get really an understanding and an awareness of the collection in its entirety. From an aviation perspective, there's nothing that rivals Kermit's collection, and it really is quite amazing to see everything that Kermit shares on YouTube. And so do take a look. But for now, that concludes today's Inspirability Talk. I hope you've enjoyed it. You can download these now on the podcast app on your device, and of course also access it via the Aerobility YouTube channel and Facebook too. We've got some really interesting talks coming up. We got Tim Orchard, a former Concorde captain, is going to be sharing with us his memories of flying Concorde back in the 1980s and 1990s, and quite a few more talks coming up. So we're not done yet. We've still got plenty to give. Don't forget, you can still donate to Aerobility, a little or as much as you wish, to keep this amazing organisation going. But I'll leave you to your Saturday evenings now, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Bye bye.